It's a bit of a serious topic, guys. Episode 2.
I know, where's the fun?
You ready?
We're ready. Hello and welcome back to the second episode of Simply Simple. I know last week I botched the name. I said Simply.
Can't believe it.
So I thought this is our first proper introduction.
I feel so shy. I don't know why. It's because there are 900 plus of you who watched our trailer. Now, I don't know if they're unique views. They're probably not.
It's probably just me looking at it 900 times.
You don't even have social media, bro.
The layout to feel better.
But you're not missing out, don't worry. So you can stay off social media.
We are recording this before our first episode releases. So by the time this comes out, we could be cancelled.
I'd hope, actually. Like, oh, I don't think so. But then now that I think of it, I'm like, we probably could have said something controversial. I can already imagine the people being like, oh, you don't know online dating. I don't know.
Yeah, some people might not like it. And like we said, that's completely fine.
I did put a disclaimer in there.
Yes, so
don't come at us.
Yeah, how do you feel in your second week of speaking to the microphone and a camera?
I was so excited to film this week. I felt like this week felt like a bit of a drag. And then I was just looking forward to Saturday. I saw Dhruv at work plenty of times this week. Or at least I saw you a lot this week. It was Eid, so Ramadan Mubarak for everyone who is celebrating. We were so excited to film. I think we were tempted to film on the night of Ramadan, but we're like, hang on, we need the production.
That's right. We need everything ready. And I was preparing for this episode by looking over the tape. I studied the film, as they say, and I am now going to make sure I speak a lot better and into the microphone. So
yes, you're like this.
Yeah, for those complaining about my sound quality in episode 1. By the time you listen to episode 2, it should be fixed.
Guys, relax. He does have a communications degree. He just forgot about it.
Yeah, so should we just talk about what we're going to discuss today?
Well, I mean, before we do that, how did you think episode 1 went? And I hope a majority of you, some of you, maybe 1 or 2 of you liked episode 1.
Yeah, if you're still here, good on you. We really do appreciate it, making it 50 minutes in of us just yapping, as you would call
50
it.
50 minutes flies by.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it feels good. I think it's a fun thing to do, and hopefully, like we said, hopefully people like it or find it useful.
I really liked it. Was really comfortable. I'm not just saying this because Dhruv is my partner, but I'm saying it in the sense that we finally have a platform to kind of talk about our experiences. This wasn't an overnight podcast. I think we were talking about this idea on and off for like a year or so. And here we are.
Yeah, maybe by episode 3 we'll have a painting.
Yes, we still don't have anything, but we are elevated. Kmart coming through with the elevation.
Yeah, but if you want something broadcast, just let us know and we'll consider putting...
We'll do a live stream.
We'll put your image up behind us if it helps, but... Yeah.
Actually, maybe we could do that. Like, if you send us a comment or something, we'll just enlarge it, print it, and put it back here. Maybe that's our photos.
That could be our new gimmick.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Yeah.
We'll put your face next to your comment too. But if you want to be anonymized, too bad.
Yeah, and we're also looking for a logo. So we have something, but if you think you can do something better, please let us know.
Yes, well, don't make me negotiate with a kind fellow. I don't know about kind, actually. I walked into the furniture store today and I'm like, hey, this is my budget. There was no I also need to know.
Bleep that out.
I don't know how to do the duck and I'm probably going to forget about it. And he was like, oh, the stools are $200. And like there was like 20 different styles and stools and fabrics, and I'm like, is there anything that meets my budget of like I cannot justify paying more than $60 for a stool at this place. If you're like a premium place, like what's that place called? The Cocoa
Republic.
Yeah, like okay. Look, I don't really know Cocoa Republic, but I already know that it more than likely is worth the $200.
Maybe by episode 20. we'll be able to upgrade stalls.
Yes.
But
It
this
was
is the grungy aesthetic for
yes.
lack.
But also
It's a quasi podcast set.
Drew, that word. I We were laughing at my reaction to quasi. Like that was the first time I've heard of that word in that context, and I feel like now I'm using it everywhere.
Yes, so we can broaden our vocabulary. But yeah, do you want to give a rundown of what this episode is about?
Yes, so this episode is going to be all about non-traditional relationships. Now, Drew and I, we gave you a bit of a baseline in episode 1 that I'm Islamic slash half Christian. It's confusing.
Quasi-Islamic.
Quasi Islamic. So I didn't just say quasi because I think I'm Islamic. It's because I'm going through an interesting phase of what religion do I say? But yes, I am Islamic and also half Christian, but I don't practice the Christianity side because both my parents chose to go through the Islamic route. Um, Dhruv is Hindu, quasi Hindu. You don't have any Catholicism or
No,
anything.
just pretty basic, simple,
Simply simple.
single origin.
Howdy who. Well, anyways, I don't think we're both not overly religious. We respect our religions. I don't know specifically any words you're going to throw at me, but and if you do, just at least whisper them so I can use these big words. Um, I would say I'm not overly religious. However, I respect my religion. I think it's a beautiful religion to be a part of. I think unfortunate events have portrayed Islam as something terrible, but it's such a beautiful religion about goodwill and Ramadan, for example, celebrating that with family and at work was really, really nice. You know, just the purity of it as well. Look, I don't pray 5 times a day, but I do other pillars that I think, to me, at this stage of life, that I value the most, which is giving back to especially poor children and orphans. That is a huge component. And I keep telling you one day I really want to go and see orphans in Fiji, which my parents also encouraged me to do. Um, and I do read the Quran more so. I'm doing the English version as well. So I can read Arabic, I can interpret it, but I'm trying to understand what the Arabic is translating to in English. The extent of religion, that's the extent I practice Islam. So it's not a lot, but I think everyone is each to their own.
Certainly. So I am kind of Hindu. So
Kind of, identity
I have to use
crisis.
different words. I can't keep on
You
repeating.
can't
the
use
same.
quasi.
No,
You
no,
gotta
we
use
can't. We
another word.
can't beat that into the ground. So yes, I'm kind of Hindu, and I don't say I practice it as much as you practice Islam. But I think what's quite interesting is the fact that we are what some might call a non-traditional relationship because you are
Yes.
one religion and I am a different religion. And traditionally, people of the same religion came together.
Yeah.
But we are now in 2025 and that expectation has now changed. And people.
To an extent.
To an extent, and we'll certainly talk a bit about that. But I think before we go down that rabbit hole, we can just talk about our experiences being in a non-traditional relationships. I'll let you open the floor.
It's a huge, chunky topic, and I'm not surprised if I have to edit a lot of this to like a 50-minute episode. But
People love jump cuts, so I think it's fine.
yeah, we'll do a lot of those. I think, you know, I kind of touched on it in episode 1 how when you grow up in a household, for me, obviously, an Islamic household, where you're taught that there's a particular path to do things. So I set the example of going through uni, not really worrying about dating, just really different things that, my parents may not have expected me to do, which was dating Drew or even hanging out with a boy. They just thought you were a friend initially. We can talk about that a little later. Um, yeah, I think it's just one of those things where you think a certain way, you go to a certain path, and I think from a young age, I never really I kind of saw things differently. And I'm not saying that in a way where I'm like, oh, if I do it this way, it's probably better. But I was always curious to the question of why. Like, why do we do things the way that we do? I was just really curious. I wanted to kind of break out of this shell and really find my own identity and who I was. And I feel like I've just seen generally, particularly in the arranged side, in the matriarchy, a traditional marriage goes. And I knew from a young age that wasn't for me. And I want to also just say my parents never imposed religion on me. They never said to wear a headscarf or anything at all. They permitted me to dye my hair, even though preferably they wouldn't have wanted me to. And even now I look back, I'm like, damn, hair damage. They never imposed that type of stuff, just as long as we were being good girls. And I frankly don't even think dating was a thought until that one occurrence. I'm not going to say incident where they're like, oh,
Make it
shit,
sound
we
so
have to think about it.
dangerous. Oh, that incident.
They made it sound dangerous. It was a very depressing, I think it was second last year of uni.
Well, let's talk about some of the struggles. What was the challenges in being or starting into a non-traditional relationship?
One is being sure of yourself. And I talked a little bit about trying to find and build my own identity. And I knew that the person that I want to be at 40, 50, 60, even 30, hold so close to it. I knew that I wanted to explore life a bit. And this would sound silly to any person who is not as ethnic as us, but it sounds quite silly. One is being sure of yourself that this is your identity and this is a relationship you want to pursue. I didn't know, like, obviously there was feelings for Drew, but I just didn't know if I was being ahead of myself, if I was being sure of myself. But my gut, and can't emphasize it enough, always listen to your gut, said that this is the path I want to take. And I've always been set solid. I don't want to go through a traditional route, and I'm happy to expand on that as well. But that's the first struggle, being sure of yourself. Second, I would say, is um, having your parents understand your perspective. Now, if you're the younger child, you will know that your parents always opt to your older child for advice or to set an example of some kind. I think also for my parents, like at this point, me and my sister, like, we never really introduced boys to our parents. At this point, my sister didn't introduce anyone at all to my parents. So you were the first person, the first guy I introduced my parents to. So trying to get their understanding that this is actually okay was a whole struggle. Obviously, like, I'd admittedly say I fell into depression for like a year, 2 years, because that was a lot of burden that was put on both of us emotionally, not just me.
Yeah, it's quite interesting you say that. I think my first point in response is that I perhaps I come from a family that is Hindu, but at least my parents and family, they are more secular in the sense that they do practice Hinduism, but they are quite open to people of different religions. And I
And they
think
never impose Hinduism on you.
no, not necessarily. It was quite a yeah. I guess it wasn't something that wasn't personally, and maybe that's not necessarily. It's not necessarily good. It's not necessarily bad. I think there's pros and cons of having a religion imposed on you. Sounds very strict, but just general practice, I guess. that there are pros and there are cons to having that experience in childhood. I think what perhaps helped in our experience was that I do have an older brother, and there was someone of a different religion as well who was introduced to my parents before. So that probably did make things a bit easier
Kind
on
of
me.
pave the
Yeah,
pathway.
yeah, pave the way forward. And I think that that second point about depression, it's based on what I understand and what I think some other people have been looking into over the past 10 or so years, is that there is reason to believe that people in these non-traditional or cross-cultural relationships, however you want to say it, there is reason to believe that there are higher rates of depression and
Mm.
anxiety, and even to the point that these types of relationships actually have a lower likelihood of being successful. It's more likely to break up, for example, than
Yes. That was
do you think that's why do you think that
yeah.
might be the case?
I think because after a while, your significant other whose parents are, in a relationship, especially a non-traditional relationship, more than often one person one person's parents are better handling and are more accepting, and the other, which is generally the female, I would have to say, our dads are, for all the right reasons, overprotective of us. I think one of the first things my parents said was that, this guy just wants you for lust and he doesn't want you for love. And I'm like, sure. I think the reason why relationships don't last in that context is because the person who has the more chill parents, I would say, they just get fed up after a while of waiting. Obviously you're communicating with that partner, but they just their patience runs out. And I think you had a lot of patience in that sense. It took us 3 years to work on just getting to that acceptance stage with my parents. And it's not something that can be done overnight. You have to remember that there are religious reasons, but even stepping outside of that, the dynamics of my parents, for those who do come from an arranged marriage background as well, and a different lifestyle, like things were different in Fiji, where my parents were initially from, and also the dynamics of a arranged marriage are different from a love relationship. So I think we have to take those factors on board, and also the general hesitancy as well. Some people don't really get exposed or even think about these things because they don't think it's an issue with their children to bring up. They just assume that, Fauzia will marry a Muslim guy, but, you know, things are different.
Yeah, it's a good point you raise about patience, and I'm just gonna do a tie back or crossover to episode one when we talked about fish in the
A
sea
bit of
and
quasiing.
yes, and online dating. And I think you mentioned patience being something that you thought really helped. Is that something that you think makes being in a non-traditional relationship perhaps more difficult today than it was in the past, where perhaps people might be less patient? Is that something you think might impact the success or the chance that people do enter into these types of relationships?
I Another tough question. It's really tough, and I'm going to pose a question to you. But I think there's a lot of work that went on my side, and obviously Drew was kept in the loop with everything. Um, I think I can't speak for other relationships. I really can't. Like, I don't know. It's really difficult, but I think patience plays a huge key in the success. Like, I think that, and this sounds so terrible to say, but I'm surprised that you didn't run out of patience. 3 years is a long time. I know friends who've gone through a similar thing of, the girl's parents not accepting. But after a year, the parents have accepted, and it took us 3 years. So the fact that like Drew and I, like we were quite patient. This guy especially, I'm sure we lost our bonkers at one stage. But I think persistence, like from the get go, we knew that wow, this turned very corny. We wanted to be with each other. And I think that those initial feelings of loving that person, not just because of what religion they are, but because of who they are as a person, I think that persistence really paid off. So, yeah, persistence and patience that I can say determined the success of a non-traditional relationship. I also do want to premise on the fact that it also depends on your parents. I, have had conversations with friends who have overly strict parents, and I'm talking about more stricter than our parents, and their only threshold is to accept someone of the same religion, same community. It's a non-negotiable. So I am very grateful in that sense that both our parents are accepting. But I would say those two factors determine the success. Um, Question for you is: were there moments where you just felt like you were just onto the last thread of patience? Because there were moments where, like, uni was our safe haven. That was the place where we could see each other. If you have a flexible schedule at uni as well, like we'd go to like Manly at like 1 p.m. Like we would make days out of uni. Even the days where we didn't have uni, we'd meet up somewhere. Um, you know, it, just good times. But did you feel as though you were running out of patience, or how do you think patience played a role for you?
I mean, I think there's times where things do get tested suddenly.
Mm.
So I can't really explain how I stayed so patient. I guess I am just blindly optimistic sometimes that things will work out.
You're so
Maybe,
sweet.
maybe it's
That's a
actually
good way
maybe it's actually very negative.
saying it.
It's a negative character trait, maybe, where you're too patient. But
Yeah, but
I guess
nothing in life ever comes easy, right?
that's true. But
This could have come easier, but we did it.
yes, yes. So I think that's just a general thing where I just wanted to try it out and see what would happen.
Mm.
And I'm glad it's a lot better now than perhaps it was back then.
Would you say like the I'm just going to, in this scenario, we're going to assume the guy's parents and you, like obviously, did you find that um there were moments where you think it wouldn't have gone the way it did if especially I was persistent enough?
I think it takes two to tango or work properly. I think you were persistent, I was patient, and I think it probably did help that on my side there wasn't really much of an issue. I think perhaps if you had a situation where my side was also very against it or not necessarily supportive, then I think that's when you would have probably it would have been a lot harder for me to be patient and for you to be
Mm.
persistent because then now you're facing attacks on both sides, and that is a lot more difficult to counter and a lot more difficult to fight through than if it's just one side where you
Mm.
can work together more easily to try and fight for the relationship.
I also, it goes back to your point as well of your older or our older brother who paved the way for um, relationships, um, which was very nice because in my context, I paved the way for my sister's relationships. So I think that contributed. I also am very grateful for my sister in this context. There would be arguments and all that chaos. And after a while, I mean, she initially thought, she was like, the hell are you doing? And, it really did impact the mental health. It wasn't until a particular moment in time, I can't pinpoint it, where my sister actually said to my parents, look, this is fine. Um, and I don't know if that, if there's younger sisters out there who can relate to this dynamic of having to always feel like you need to pitch yourself and trying to tell your parents, look, I'm not my oldest sister, but this is me. Like, I'm the younger sister. We may be the same blood, but we like different things. We have a bit of a different identity. She really helped kind of also put my parents over that line. I think being 3 years younger than my sister as well, there obviously is hesitation. Like, she's young. She's not thinking. Has a frontal lobe developed? We don't know. Like, there's all these like considerations. I do want to kind of segue a bit. Actually, it's a bit of a serious topic, guys. Episode 2.
I know. Where's the fun? I'm just like, wow.
I'm waiting for you to crack a joke. I don't even have one. Anyways, I want to talk a little bit about. Oh, I'm seeing your first point. Talk about how we feel 1 week in. Oh, that's a podcast. I thought it was 1 week into our relationship. I'm like, I don't remember. Ooh,
I wouldn't do that to you. That's.
I thought you were really testing me.
I know the answer already. So.
I haven't been on Lumosity for a while. So, anyways,
Math's your best subject, is that right?
Maths?
Yeah.
Oh, on Lumosity, yes. In real life, no. I mean, you're the only lawyer who I know who likes law and maths. I'm going to be one of those lawyers who will actually, like, I was going to say, like, hire a maths tutor, but I'll go to you. If I have any maths questions, I'll go to you. Anyways,
it's not fun being me sometimes.
No, it is. Anyways, tell me a little bit about your parents' reaction.
I don't remember the exact specifics of this, but I think he just saw patterns in behavior that were a bit abnormal, like saying
that this is not Dhruv. Dhruv's showing love.
Yeah, exactly. What is this affection? Never. Yeah, the weird side of him.
Who is my Dhruvy seeing? Anyways.
Yeah, so it was just things like calling all night, and honestly, I don't know what else gave it away. It's probably that, but he must have saw something up. It's very. I guess people who know each other know like when something's different.
Well, especially if it's your own son, right?
Yeah.
But your dad was very smart in how he just guessed. It's like a sixth sense almost. Yes, we don't want to talk about how my parents found out, so we'll leave that to maybe we'll just create an OnlyFans and have paid content,
or like for Patreon. Yeah,
a Patreon. Oh God, is
not like that.
No, not like that. Jesus Christ! I don't even think about those.
What
apps.
you were looking before you went.
I was meant to say. Meant to say Patreon. Anyways, there's a lot of YouTubers who have premium content on like OnlyFans, and it's not like that kind of content. But I'm like, those platforms are evolving into other content. Anyways, segueing.
We can talk about tech platforms in another episode if you'd like.
Episode 25. Yes. Let's talk about how the first reaction was of our parents, or kind of the nerves and emotions that we felt for the like us meeting parents individually and then coming together. I can't pinpoint dates. I know you're good at your chronologies. I just don't remember the first time you met my parents and I met yours.
I think yours would have been around September 2017, I'm guessing. So quite a long time ago. And I think my parents, I have no idea, honestly. I think that's probably... I feel like it wasn't that year as well. I just couldn't give you a month. Or a day, really.
Oh my gosh, yes. I still remember those emotions very, very, very visibly. So obviously, like, our uni days were moments where we could spend more time with each other and do activities and go out, eat brunch, all that good stuff. And I think there was a day where you're like, did you want to meet my dog? And I got a bit nervous because I didn't tell him that I was scared of dogs. And disclaimer, this Kendrick, he was the first dog where I met and absolutely fell in love with the dog, Kendrick, and dogs in general. No longer scared, but then I've put a high threshold that I just need Samoyeds. Anyways, segueing. So I remember like Drew, we were at his house and he was showing me around. First time being over at his house, first time seeing this cute little cupcake of a dog. And I remember you opened a cupboard. I don't know what you were getting, but no, you were showing me a photo of your parents, a really big canvas one. And I love that photo. I think it should be hung up, but I remember looking at your parents. I'm like, this is making me nervous. Like, first of all, they looked absolutely beautiful in that photo. And,
So the beauty got you nervous.
well, I'll talk about that soon, but I just, when I saw that photo, I felt pretty warm. Like, I felt very comforted. Like, when I saw your mum, like, I knew she took, good care of her sons, and I knew that she would maybe take good care of me at the time. Um, but when I saw them, I got quite overwhelmed, and we will talk about the first generation background later, but I got quite intimidated because I'm like, I don't know if these Indian parents have high expectations for you to find a girl from a certain background, from a certain, story or whatever. Anyways, when I met his parents, I was quite nervous, but they never made it nerve wracking at all. They were just curious to know, like, things about me. And it never felt vindicating or anything at all. I know your first meets with my parents are a bit rough, but I think I can barely remember. It was just such a crazy time. It's just been fogged out, honestly.
Yeah, it wasn't a very positive experience.
And I'm sad that it had to happen like that, but it's part of our story.
Exactly. You, I think, understand where people come from and why people want things done in that traditional way, and why it can be difficult from people who have just immigrated here
Yeah.
to, because they haven't lived in a multicultural society. It's a bit harder for them, I think, to accept or imagine these non-traditional relationships.
Yeah, especially when my parents come from a traditional, or any parents who come from a traditional background. Um, it's complex. There are so
Not
much.
simple.
It's not simple. Seriously. But yeah, like, without going too much into detail, like, we, obviously we are getting married, and we can attest to the fact that our persistence and patience worked off. And you know, it is what it is now. It's absolutely beautiful what it is now. Like, my parents call Drew's son. They ask more about you than they do about me. And I have to say, my dad really appreciates having a son. Like, he played soccer. He never really opened up about soccer and sports and more about his childhood until he met you. So I think the impact that you've had has been huge. And now my sister's fiance, he has two sons, and that's very heartwarming for him. But we had to set a bit of the context. It was, as you can kind of get from the general vibes. I said vibes in the last episode. I didn't like it.
See, vibe's not the word of the
Not the
podcast.
word. Think of one. I can't think of
We'll
one.
develop it over the conversation.
Yes. The atmosphere. But yes. That sounded very opera-esque of me. But yeah, I am like tossing and turning in my seat right now and gripping Drew's like knees because I haven't really thought about those times and I haven't really talked about it as much. It just had a huge dent in our relationship to begin with.
Yeah, I think this is our therapy podcast. So I think if you're listening, I'm sorry
Yes.
for letting all of the pain and emotions out. Um, if I can segue a bit, I
Yes,
was
can we let's do some uplifting.
I was just thinking it'd be an interesting podcast if our silhouettes were just the only thing on screen. I, like it looks quite
I
interesting.
can already see myself making a bit of an edit in the trailer of my reaction.
We have a live feed, and I just thought it was very interesting how the shadows move, and I thought that'd be an interesting idea too.
Anyways, yeah,
So you
so
wanted to go to the agenda. I was happy just to riff a bit. So please go on the agenda.
I think this could be like a 2 hour episode if we. Sorry, we're. Okay, anyways. So I guess given our experience, how do we define non traditional? Um, and what do we see it to be compared to what your Indian auntie or that Indian auntie tells you what tradition is to be?
Well, I think we've answered that already. It is, in our sense, cross cultural,
Mm.
and it would be something where the Indian auntie looks at him and says, "Eh," or thinks that at least.
That sounds like your mum. What? Um,
I was never impersonating anyone.
I think absolutely. Cross multicultural,
Or
cross
cross.
cultural. I'm just like it's so bizarre. Quasi cultural. Um, non traditional. I forgot what I defined it as when I was speaking to you, like maybe a few days ago before we shot episode 1. But really good definition, not too long ago. Now I've forgotten it.
We'll do a nice jump cut, and it'll be like you've always remembered it.
I remember non traditional to be as where you have differing values, you still have respect for your religion. Um, you're not completely off a different path, but you're seeking experiences. Um, so that's what non-traditional means to me. It just basically means just putting yourself in a different kind of journey whilst having respect for your religion and for your parents and people around you. Anyways, I feel like Indian aunties, they would say obviously the complete opposite, like, marrying someone, as you said, X has to marry X and Y has to, like, you know what, like, I don't know, just stuff that I just can't comprehend in this day and age now.
Sure. So I think we've kind of gone through a lot of this already in terms of stereotypes in the relationship and
Mm.
dealing with different family members, and also our experiences and the challenges that's popped up. I think we've also kind of
Yeah.
run through that. Is there anything else you think is worth mentioning on those topics that we might not have already covered?
Well, I don't know. I don't think we're missing much. That's a very high level overview. But if you do want us to talk more specific about our experiences, then that can wait. No, I don't have anything.
Okay. So, did you want to talk about why there's more are non-traditional relationships becoming more common in Australia?
Oh yeah. I think especially Gen Zs, millennials, we talked a little bit about women in the last episode where we're marrying later, like the timeline is extending. And I do feel like that plays a part, but also the fact that we can, as women, um, have our own sense of identity. And I think having our own sense of identity isn't just like being able to work, which was completely the opposite from back in the days, or at least in an arranged setting. But we have more of a voice of what we want. And I think we've been exposed to our own family and extended family to know what we want and what we don't want. I think it also comes down to you as a person. Like, what is your personality type? Are you a person who doesn't mind getting a bit adventurous and having a bit of curiosity? Or are you someone who prefers to be, following the kind of path that has been set down for you? And there's no wrong pathway. It's just really, what you prefer.
And are there any negatives to being in a non-traditional relationship?
Yes. Yes. I like just negatives in terms of like kind of dynamics between people or with parents.
I think just in terms of your interactions with
Mm.
others.
I think that there's one I can think of, a stigma. Um, you know, Drew has been to some of my family events, and it does come to a bit of a shock that, oh, well, who is this new guy that Faust has brought? But I think it's a little bit of a shock because especially when you're someone who is paving the way in the family tree, um, the expectation is that you continue that family tree of marrying a Muslim person. But I think the realization was, oh, this person is another religion. How is that going to work? What pathway will your children choose from a religious perspective? So there's a bit of stigma in terms of like, is this relationship, um, is she just being bratty? Or is she just like, defying her parents' like rules? Um, it could even be imposed on the parents, like, oh, what are the parents doing? Like they should have more control over the daughter, for example. So I think the stigma is there just in terms of the actual relationship, the rising of it. You know, in a family of tradition, um, it's often frowned upon, but that's kind of the main negative thing I can think about. We've obviously talked about mental health and the detrimental effects of it, but
What
yeah.
about to any hypothetical children who will have to go through an experience where they don't maybe have a set religion from their parents?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Um, without going to detail, sometimes I'm just freezing up because I'm like, how do I word these things, right? So obviously, my dad has two religions, and he chose the Islamic route. I'm not entirely sure if he was exposed to. I'm pretty sure he was exposed to churches growing up. But when I was growing up, I was exposed to churches. I mean, mosques mainly, and also churches. And one of the first concerns that my parents had was, what are your children going to be? Well, I said to my parents they can be anything that they want. And they had even more of a crisis on top of their crisis when I was talking in the initial few months of, introducing you. But I think, like, to approach that question, if you're in a non-traditional relationship and your parents say, "What are your children going to be?" You can say what I said. They can be anything that they want, um, and it'll be fine. That's honestly all I said because I think it comes down to the core of trusting your daughter or your son with their decision. And I think if the trust is there to know that your daughter is doing the right thing with knowledge, I don't think they'll contest too much to that question. But obviously there'll be concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going back to the idea of choice. I mean, we talked earlier about in episode one about too much choice. Is this too much choice for the child?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, and I've said this time and time again, I think it's absolutely beautiful being exposed to another religion. Like and that's the other thing that made me realize, like, you know, it wasn't until I met you and then over the 8 years that we've been together where I've learned more and more about um, Hinduism. Like it's absolutely beautiful, and I understand people who do preach their religion. I understand that, but I also think that um, we shouldn't just be studying cultural studies to know about a religion. I think this was absolutely, like, I have no issues. Whatever my children want to be, my children want to be. But I think that exposing them, similar to what my dad did to my sister and I'll expose them to a mosque, I'll expose them to a temple, I'll expose them to Eid, to Diwali. It's all just beautiful. And I feel like sometimes we just stress so much about how things are going to be. You can't predict how things are going to be. You have a certain extent to control things. If my children are curious, have any questions, I want them to come to us as to people who can safeguard and give them the information they need to understand. But in terms of informing their decisions, I can do. But in terms of actually what they decide upon, I can't control that. Or
Very.
we, rather.
That is very wise. Did you have anything else to add on this topic? I might just have one.
I was going to say, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that on one view, yes, you have. I think it's good to be exposed to different religions, and I'm certainly supportive of the idea that people should have space to figure out what works best for themselves. I think there is an argument, or there is another perspective that by having exposure to other different religions, you're maybe missing out on a community of people in one type of religion because you're not dedicated enough, or you haven't committed fully to it, and maybe that is maybe a bit more on the negative side, where
Hmm.
you don't feel you have a bit of an identity crisis,
Mm.
and you don't might be difficult for that child or anyone to manage in that.
You raised a good point as well, because you don't know what you don't know. So if you're not exposed, how would you know? Like I never really knew anyone. I didn't know how what you and your family practiced, celebrated things. I had none of that. And sometimes I feel like there's so much cautiousness, maybe. Like I think a lot of people are just so um there's like this psychological thing that in their brain that my children, they have to marry this certain religion, but if they marry another religion, it may not go well. Why do we think that way? It's because we're so accustomed to thinking in the specs of that religion. We'll see when the whole children thing will pop up, and that's not a few years ago away, so we're good. We're fabulous. We're set. What have we learned today about this relationship, Drew, and about cross culturalism and marrying into a different religion?
Patience, persistence. That's the simple way of saying it.
I would have added on to that, but that's it. Patience and persistence. It's not always an easy journey. And again, there are a lot of factors that play into it. Depends on your parents. It also depends on the greater community as well. Like, obviously, if you if anything that occurs in your family also impacts your community, that's also a consideration. One important thing to add as well is just looking out for the other person. Um, Throughout that 3-year journey, there were moments where Drew and I were at such a down, like, we want this relationship to work, but is it going to work? We were so hopeful, and I'm glad we remained persistent in that manner. But just look out for the other person. And I'm not saying this just for the female. I know I went through a lot of crappy times just to kind of get it over the line, but every time I have a friend who may have gone through a similar thing, I just say, also watch out for your partner. I think men's mental health is another thing, but it's really important to know how um, the male is doing. Alrighty. Did you want to introduce this next section?
Yeah, it's a bit of a trial run here.
Everything's a trial run. You know what? We probably won't get set solid and running off the ground until like episode 100.
That's true. This is just the pilot.
Maybe we'll have studio lights.
Maybe, yeah, we'll have that and like confetti or something.
Maybe we'll have
Just, like,
fan mail
Yeah, maybe we can just read it on screen, like
from our parents.
Yeah.
They're very cute. They're like, we're so keen to listen to your podcast. And we're
Yeah,
like,
and maybe not
yes.
after this episode.
Yeah. We're like, oh, we've just stopped at that one episode.
Next segment is follow up and foolery. In the sense that well, it's just that
Follow ups and foolery.
I'm just mimicking people listening who are like, what is going on?
Yes.
So this is just where we talk about what's happened in the past week in a very short, succinct
You want to
way.
kick us off?
Yes, we had a cross-cultural experience with Eid.
Yes, I love that. So every time that there's Diwali or Ramadan, both families come together, and it's so heartwarming. Because Dhruv and I sit there and and the parents are just yapping, and it's chaotic and loud, but we just sit there.
We don't yap.
We don't yap. We just observe because we're like, we did this. This is cool.
Another duck.
Yes, true. Oh my god, yeah. It was really beautiful celebrating Eid. Just introducing different foods. My parents, obviously, they cook a mix between Turkish food and Fiji Indian food. So it's really awesome having to expose your parents to my side of the family and the way we cook things, and a lot of Turkish runs through my blood as well. So it's cool to just talk about different aspects. I know our dads love to talk about their time in Fiji, which is cool. Yeah, I love it. And I'm just grateful that it's come to that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot better situation now. But yeah, I think that might wrap up unless you have anything else you wanted to add.
No, I was so nervous this episode. I don't know why. I think the topic is just a little unsettling. Not as lighthearted as we obviously expected it to be, but I think yeah, last week was really fun filming the episode. This week was definitely more of a meaty, intense, nerve-wracking, everything, all of the above topic.
Have we killed the hype for episode 3?
I don't know. I think we have to keep it real with people. It's not all fairies and unicorns. Sometimes it's like the spicy samosa that you don't want to eat.
Oh, your audience probably loves spice though.
Yeah, no, that's the other thing. We don't. Well, I used to do spice, and now I don't. Ever since I met you, I'm like, nah. But then also, how do you do spice? Like, my stomach is just like,
Yes, we can't alienate anyone yet.
yes, no, we can't. But if you eat spice on a regular basis, I commend you. We commend you. We always embarrass like the Indian waiters. I swear at restaurants. So like, what is your spice level? Like, nothing, please.
Maybe that's what episode 3 can be about.
We got to do a bit of a bend. This
screw
one
that one
felt
up.
way too serious.
I know, we'll mix it up.
All right.
So what is episode 3 about? Do we have any ideas?
Well, we were going to talk a little bit. We're kind of mapping a bit of our story, I guess, but we wanted to talk about the aspect of, well, in this episode, we talked about introducing different religions, different families, but we're going to add that extra complexity of,
But this is a simple podcast.
well, nothing is as simple as it seems, right? That's the irony of it. We're going to talk.
It's a very deep cut.
That's a very long one too. In saying that,
It's just me interviewing you.
true. We need for you to talk more, but we hope you really enjoyed this episode. If you have any suggestions on what to talk about, please let us know. Again, these are our experiences. We love sharing them. Obviously, not everything is in great detail, but if you have a friend or a family member who's going through a non-traditional relationship and they've yet to pose it to their parents, or they have and the parents aren't accepting, Dhruv and I are more than happy to talk to them. And we've done that in the past, and we navigated it without anyone around us going through this. So, but yes, I don't want to say like, comment, and subscribe. That's too much.
But you have a OnlyFans that you're creating.
It's meant to be Patreon. We get some tech support from Drew afterwards.
Yeah, that's the big plus of being in a non-traditional relationship. Some stereotypes like being the IT person holds. So
Hey!
do you have anything to add to that?
No.
So it's very fun being guys and very fun being in a non-traditional relationship. Some things never change, no matter if you're in cross-cultural or monoculture or
Yeah, some things stay the
single
same.
origin.
You're still going to be dealing with your girl. Like, she's still going to be asking you to fill up her Stanley or massage her feet or her back. And if you stop massaging her at like 2 minutes, she'll literally say, keep going. Like, none of that will change. It's just the socio-cultural aspects. But anyways, we hope you enjoyed, and we will see you in the next episode.
Whatever that is. Bye.
Bye. I didn't stop that.
I know.
Did you practice?
I pressed it.